Good afternoon. And welcome to everyone who is joining us on the internet. I'm going to put you on the spot. 2 weeks ago, I gave you a homework assignment. Does anyone remember what it was? The homework assignment was to notice during the coming week how many times and in what ways your egos distracted you from asking the one essential question. Does that ring any bells? Does anyone remember what the one essential question was? 2 gold stars. For Mark. Yes, sir.
Where do I go to find protection?
Indeed. Did anyone explore that? And does anyone remember what they discovered as a result? Okay. It's on.
There is no place to go for protection.
No. The question was, did you notice how your ego distracted you from asking the question?
No, I didn't.
I got busy doing things that had those words involved in them and circled around the concept and never directly embraced the question, honestly waiting for an answer. I just stayed busy thinking about it and studying about it.
What kind of thoughts went through your mind?
What kind of activity that I could do to create that space or find that space versus just accepting it from God, accepting that it's true and allowing that experience to come in God's terms.
Can you think of any specific interactions with others where you did not go to where your safety was, but engaged in subterfuge and reaction and what the techniques were that you used?
Well, really, when I get close to it, I want to undermine the activity, and I'll get mad. I'll get impatient, and I start looking for faults in other people that seem obvious to me. That I find those to be irritating, and the closer it gets, the more angry I get, the more frustrated I get with how other people aren't getting it, and approaching it does create
Approaching what?
Approaching just honestly, sitting still and being quiet with the question there generates some kind of intense frustration, and eventually goes into anger.
Contemplating what?
Asking the question and sitting still and waiting for the answer.
What question?
Where can I go to find safety, to be protected? When I ask the question and really want an answer, I'm invited to become frustrated and enraged with children, walking around making noise, somebody. It just is. I become hypersensitive and very judgmental. As I really worked at it and asked the question and tried to be still. As I did that, which was repetitive. I mean, it wasn't like I did it once, but as I worked with that and I became more sincere with it, I found I began to be reacted. I know my behavior was harder to control, and I mean, it rustled some stuff loose in there. So I gave up pretty quick. A few days of trying, and I had space to myself where my environment was a little different. I was out of town, and so I was crying because I really wanted it. I mean, I really wanted it, and I got really sincere and asked the question. And as I became more sincere, and it brought stuff up that I don't know that I could clearly say why or how. It's not like it makes any sense that a child making some noise would irritate me that much, but I just noticed that I started to become real judgmental and hypersensitive, and not the usual nice guy that got everything all bolted down. It stirred up some stuff. And I became really wanting an answer.
And it wasn't enlightenment that got stirred up.
No.
No. Does what Mark has shared remind any of you of any experiences you had during the last couple of weeks?
I'm thinking of that prayer that you gave us, the kingdom, which is me, which is us, is, and now my mind is just going blank, not perfectly unified and perfectly protected, and the ego shall not prevail against it, because that's what came up when I got really frightened one time. And it just came up over and over and over again when the fear would, it worked for 2 seconds and then it'd be back again. And as long as I kept saying that, and then what came to me was this wonderful sensation that, the kingdom is unified. I'm unified with everything, that I'm not alone. There isn't any way then I can keep thinking of myself as separate.
Yes. Anyone else?
I wrote that down, that question, but I think I forgot about it really quickly. But that week, I had a couple of real big fits, just where I was really trying to arrange out there to get my safety. And I was really trying to make somebody, give it to me. And I didn't even remember that we had that, because I got so embroiled in the fits. I think I felt extremely vulnerable and just was grabbing it. Okay, how about you, or how about money, or how about this, to make me feel safe.
Each of you has spoken of particular situations or instances that caused you to become unglued, unsettled, uncomfortable. But what I want all of you to be aware of is that you are constantly ill at ease, even when no specific circumstance has caused you to flare up or for your ego to flare up. You are constantly primed for blow-ups. You are constantly on edge, poised to defend yourselves. I do not say this to you to disturb you. I say this to you so that you might understand that in your relative peace, you already are disturbed. You've just gotten used to it. And as a result, you don't bother to ask, where is my protection? Where is my safety? Where can I find my peace? Now, Paul heard me ask the question as well, and somehow thought that he was exempt from participating. And he was going to be very interested to see what everyone else had to say. And as a result, he went through 2 weeks of constant opportunity to notice how his ego was distracting him from asking the essential question. As a result of his not recognizing his ongoing uneasiness, and thereby missing the point that his uneasiness was the result of a choice he had made not to be joined. He, like Mark and Judy, found himself finding fault with others. They were the reason he was miserable. And then poor Susan comes along and says, I don't know if you realize it, but you're really being cranky. You're really not on the beam. You're really not listening. And of course, Paul had allowed himself already to get into a state of self-pity. And then, when she confronted him with the answer, he saw her as finding fault with him, and maintained the distraction further by arguing with her and being unkind to her, by suggesting that she was being thoughtless and insensitive, and you don't beat a guy when he's already down, etc. Here, she was presenting to him what would allow him to get out of his funk. And he saw it as even more reason to stay in his funk. Now, the point is that as long as you are seeing yourself as an independent agent, as long as you're seeing yourself in your own right, which ultimately means your own wrongness, you are experiencing vulnerability. You are experiencing vulnerability. No matter how numb you've become to it, you are experiencing vulnerability. And the only answer, the only resolution to that vulnerability is to stop maintaining your independent, autonomous standpoint. The idea that you can exist, quote, in your own right, unquote, with your own rights that everyone else better recognize. And of course, any action you take to get other people to recognize your rights is the way mutually agreed upon definitions are arrived at. Now, if you can get everyone to agree with you that you have rights of your own, and they agree to give them to you in exchange for your giving them their rights, you all are working together, consorting together, conniving together to keep yourself from seeing where the answer lies, which is in not maintaining an autonomous stand, an independent stand. I will tell you something, and I'm telling Paul something. The more experience you have at being joined with me or with the Holy Spirit, the more experience you get at being in communion, the more you're going to find acts of independence to be increasingly uncomfortable. And so what used to not bother you so much will now become extremely bothersome. And being unjoined will be an increasingly uncomfortable experience. And in fact, I believe this is what we talked about last week. And this is the way you learn that there is no value in independent, autonomous activity, or the attempt to engage in independent, autonomous activity. The more uncomfortable it becomes, the less value you will find in it. The more apparent it will become that when you are joined, when you are seeking not to be alone, and you are letting involvement occur with me, or with the Holy Spirit, or with the Father, the more the peace and the stability and the experience of invulnerability that you have in that joined place will be obviously desirable. And so in this process of strenuous back and forth flip-flopping, you begin to learn that you want to choose again, that you want to choose something new. That it really is more valuable to be joined, not with other egos in mutually agreed upon definitions, but with me or the Holy Spirit or the Father in the experience of unity and harmony and wholeness. And then, because that's what you enjoy more than suffering, you will put your weight on the side of your peace. And you will not value the stance that gives you suffering. And so this is the way you learn. It all seems too simple, perhaps. It deprives me of having fresh new ways to tell you how to wake up. Because at the bottom line, you have only one problem, and that is that you have chosen to dissociate yourself, to separate yourself from your source, and attempt to exist in that imaginary, foolish, insane state of mind. The only answer to all of your problems, to the problem of the human condition, is breaking the isolation, turning toward the altar. That is the only solution, because the only problem you're having is your committed, conscious intent to try to imagine yourself as independent and bring that state of independence into actuality. As a result, I sound monotonous. Because I can't give you 113,000 different things you could do to wake up. There's only one. That does make it utterly simple. Paul found that he was feeling vulnerable, but he didn't want to look at why. He felt vulnerable. He felt unloved. He felt disrespected. He felt discounted. On and on and on. And, you know, rather than project out on anyone, he wanted to make himself smaller and more private and just be in the sense of justified misery. Like, to hell with everyone else. I'm just going to be privately miserable. I won't make waves for anyone. I'll be kind, you know, I won't make waves. But of course his behavior changed, and those around him, like his wife, noticed that he was reclusive and uncommunicative, and so she boldly brought it to his attention. What's wrong? You don't want to hear about it. I don't want to talk about it. No, talk about it. So he talked about it, and the 10 words got out of his mouth, and it was obvious to her what the problem was, and she interrupted him. But now he was getting a little satisfaction out of somebody hearing his misery, right? And wanted more time at the podium. And so now she was thoughtlessly interrupting him when she had asked him what's wrong. When she spoke up with the correction of what would correct the problem, since there was no need to go on at length about the problem, he demanded the right to have it, or to be able to criticize her for being inconsistent. Well, you asked me. At least give me the opportunity to answer you. You see, the ego technique of self-protection of this imagined state of independence will not allow for what will undo its intent to be private, its intent to be self-directed and self-governed. And so it does everything it can to distract. First, it distracted Paul privately. It said, yeah, you have a right to just sog. You have a right to just be quiet and not bother anybody. Okay, distraction number one. Then Susan says, hey guy, in so many words, what's going on? You're not acting like yourself. Now we have distraction number two. Now we're not going to talk about, we're not going to engage in sogging. We're going to engage in defending against the imposition someone else is providing that would keep you from sogging. And so now, whoever it is that provides this, whether it's a crying baby or a barking dog or Susan confronting Paul with the answer, an attack on this bothersome element becomes a further distraction. You see, you get sort of a zigzag course further and further away from the simple answer, which is to turn toward the altar, to break the isolation. All of the distractions are relative to the original problem. But they all are distractions to your finding the answer and employing the answer. Now, this what we've been talking about relates to what we are going to be reading about. So, let us go to the book. The subject of this section is creation and communication. It should be clear by now that while the content of any particular ego illusion does not matter, it is usually more helpful to correct it in a specific context. Ego illusions are quite specific, although they frequently change, and although the mind is naturally abstract. Remember again that when it is referring to the mind, it's referring to the Christ mind, the Christ of each one of you, who is imagining that he's not the Christ, behaving as though he's not the Christ, and believing his behavior. The mind, nevertheless, becomes concrete voluntarily as soon as it splits. As soon as it says, Father, I would rather see it my way. I'd rather do it my way. I'd rather be the one to say what everything means. However, only part of it splits. So only part of it is concrete. The concrete part is the same part that believes in the ego, because the ego depends on the specific. It is the part that believes your existence means you are separate. Everything the ego perceives is a separate whole, without the relationships that imply being. It sees everything as a separate whole. It's like this plant here, the African violet, or the tree you see out in the yard. You think it is a discrete wholeness in itself. But you know what? Well, let me say this. You also think of water as a thing in itself, a wholeness. You know that you need to water the tree. So you put the water in the ground, and you know the tree will drink it up. But you know what? The tree doesn't have any way to get the water into its roots. There are organisms that live on the surface of the roots. They depend upon the tree for their existence as well as the water, and what they do with the water transfers the water to the roots, makes it possible for the roots to absorb the water. So, the tree isn't a whole on its own. It cannot exist without these organisms, and these organisms can't exist without the tree, and the tree and the organisms can't exist without the water. Everything is interdependent. Nothing is discrete and whole in itself.